Tastes like heaven in a cup. Hello, everybody. Good morning, afternoon, evening, or whatever time you decide to do your learning. Today, we're going to be talking about figurative language. Figurative language, or figures of speech, are rhetorical devices that writers use to make meaning beyond the literal or beyond the typical. When I started this video off right there, that was a simile. We're going to talk specifically about metaphors and similes today. Check out part 2 for more information about figurative language. Let's get into the lesson. All right, so today we're going to get started talking about figurative language. Figurative language, also known as figures of speech, are rhetorical devices used by writers and speakers to give words meaning beyond the typical or literal definition. Types of figurative language include, but are not limited to, similes, metaphors, personification, hyperbole, and illusion. These are some of the most common examples of figurative language, which is why these are the ones we're going to cover for the purposes of this lesson. Today, we're going to focus specifically on similes and metaphors. Similes are a comparison between two unlike things that typically uses the words like or as. Not always, though. For example, the first bullet point here, life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get, is an example of a simile. It uses the word like. The second example, however, shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate, from Shakespeare's Sonnet 18, does not use the words like or as, but it's still a simile because it's making a comparison. So simile equals comparison. A metaphor, on the other hand, states that an object or an idea is, in some way, the same as another unrelated object or idea. For example, the test was a total breeze. He is the apple of my eye. I'm feeling blue. His words cut deeper than a knife. You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. Or, if we look at this photo on the right here, saying something is the key to success would be a metaphor. So, similes compare, but metaphors say that something is the same as something else. There are lots of different types of metaphors. So there's a lot of words here. We're just going to read through it together. I'm not going to expect you to know the different types of metaphors. However, it's good to talk about them because it'll get you thinking about metaphors in a different way as you read and write poetry. So absolute metaphors compare two things that have no obvious connection in order to make a striking point. So, for example, she is doing a tightrope walk with her grades this semester. This metaphor means that she's teetering on the edge, not doing so great. These two things are absolute, they have no connection. The next one is dead metaphors. Like cliches, these are overused. So, for example, you light up my life. This isn't the worst thing to use in your poetry, but it's not the greatest either. It's very overused. The next one is extended metaphors. So these are lengthy metaphors that create deep comparisons. For example, but soft, what light through yonder window breaks? It is the east, and Juliet is the sun. Arise, fair sun, and kill the envious moon, who is already sick and pale with grief. So throughout the entire series of lines, Shakespeare is having Romeo compare Juliet to the sun. So that metaphor extends throughout a series of poetic lines. The next one is implied metaphors. So these metaphors compare two things without using specific terms. So, for example, Spending too much time with him is worse than swimming in a sea of sharks. So this doesn't say that that you are saying one thing is like another. However, the connection there is obvious. So the metaphor is implied. It's not very explicit. The final type of metaphor is root metaphors. So these metaphors are so rooted in everyday language and assumptions that we hardly even recognize them as metaphors anymore. So you could liken them to dead metaphors or cliches due to their overusage. So for example, saying something like, life is a journey. That's technically a metaphor, but most of us don't see it that way because it's so rooted in our everyday language. Think about some of the metaphors that you might hear as you go about your life. Metaphors and similes pop up everywhere. Using them within your poetry can add layers of meaning to your poetry, and being able to recognize them in poetry as a reader helps you decipher the meaning as you're reading. So the next time you pick up the pen to write or pick up a poem to read, think about similes, which are comparisons, and metaphors, which are saying that one thing is like another to add meaning.